I've spoken about this before in my Resident Evil video, but I have always been very interested in the Project Zero series, or Fatal Frame if you're in the US. I would spend hours trawling through the fan wikis, back when they were actually usable, and watching Let's Plays on YouTube. The worlds were so intriguing. I loved hearing about the horrific rituals, the ghost designs were amazing, character backstories were depressing, the locations were interesting and unique. There was just so much that I wanted to take in. I never got the opportunity to play these, as I was literally a child at the time, and by the time I was able to actually get them, the PS2 was well out of production and physical copies were tough to come by. And the one game I knew the least about, but absolutely wanted to play the most, was Project Zero 4, The Mask of the Lunar Eclipse. This game was released on the 31st of July 2008 for the Wii in Japan. And only in Japan. This was the only game in the series to never get localized, although a European release was allegedly planned, but was never released. A fan translation patch was made, and fans always hoped it would eventually be released, but with the release of Maiden of Blackwater in 2014, it wasn't looking good. But shockingly, in a Nintendo Direct in 2022, a remaster was announced, which was released in March 2023. I was very excited for this, and it was a day one purchase for me. Having since played it, I wanted to talk about it, and so here we are today. We'll be looking at the PS5 version of the game, since I trusted it to play a bit better than the Switch version. Before we begin, please be warned there will be spoilers for the whole game throughout, and also this game and video will feature some disturbing topics, such as those on screen right now, and some high-pitched noises at times, so please be warned if these are triggering for you. We'll also be playing on New Game Plus in hard mode so that I can see the special ending. Now, without further ado, let's get right into it. The game begins with two girls walking through an abandoned building. They question if this is the place where the five of them were in that photo, and why they haven't remembered anything. The leader of the pair tells the more timid one, Madoka, to just do what she says if she doesn't want to die like their two friends. Turns out, the five of them had been spirited away in the past, and they think death is their fate. The other girl walks away, while Madoka has a flashback of some memories. When she came to her senses, the other girl was gone. Madoka was alone in this scary place. Madoka is our first playable character, and we begin the prelude. I love these character intro screens. We see our character that we're controlling against a relevant background, and the rippling transition that rips through their face is done really well, while also being relevant to the game's imagery, as we'll see later. This prelude chapter, Blossoming, is essentially a tutorial with control pop-ups every so often, and oh wow, I just realized you could strafe with L1. I literally never used that, huh? We also get shown our objective in the menu, and there's a little pop-up when it changes, so there's always something giving you a vague hint on what to do. First, we have to find our friend, Misaki Aso. Here we get our first taste of gameplay, and of the reviews of this game I've seen, quite a lot of them said your character moves too slowly. Now, I don't know what those people are talking about. The movement speed is absolutely fine. I wouldn't want them to move any faster than this, honestly. Did the reviewers want Usain Bolt? It's a horror game. They're going to take their time a bit. Now they're running animation. That's a different story. Madoka's is the worst. The rest are fine. Moving forward, we see Misaki walking away from us without giving us a second thought. Madoka, I think you need new friends. I understand you only came to make sure she was alright, but still. In this next corridor, we find a flashlight on the ground. Madoka thinks it's Misaki's, but it's not. I don't know who it belongs to, honestly. I've never thought about it before now. Misaki goes into a room further on, and we get to use the flashlight. You control it with the right stick, and it can be used to see items in the environment, but it can be a bit clunky. But there's a way to circumvent that later. Turns out the door is locked, and the key is in the 2F nurse station. This is a common thread in the game, having a key be in some random other room, but it's fine, it's exploration, it's fun. We love to look at the environment. and what an environment it is. Rogetsu Hall, the area we are in at the minute, has incredible atmosphere. There are few music tracks, but every area has soundscapes of creepy ambience, some more than others, so most of the sound is footsteps, old building sounds, creaking, and usually something else relating to the current room. Also the lighting, the blue moonlight passing through the curtains of the corridors. It's not bright, but it's also not pitch black. It's just right. On the way to the nurse station, we see an incredibly pale nurse heading towards it just ahead of us. She must be very tired. They work very hard, and in these conditions, we need to get you girls a union. We also see a poster with a scary creepy face. There are a lot of creepy faces in this game. Some intentional, some not. In the nurse's station, we get the shining your flashlight on items tutorial. You have to shine the light directly onto the item before it shows up. And a lot of them are easy, but some are very, and I mean very finicky. Almost impossible. But honestly, just use the camera later to find these. It's so much easier with a lot more control. You may notice the animations for picking up items are really long. There's a reason for that. We get the key, and thankfully when you get a new key, the map will open and show you exactly where it should be used. Very thankful for this, thank you game. After leaving the station, some very loud and off-key music starts to play over the intercom. Madoka is a bit flustered by this, and honestly I get it, this music is loud, my poor eardrums. At the end of the corridor, a ghost appears. Madoka does not care. She's winning the IDGAF war, and the music stops as she enters the next room. Madoka assures that she is absolutely not a horror game protagonist. Doesn't want to remember, and just wants to go home. Same. Perfectly valid response. After unlocking the door to the museum, Madoka finally notices a ghost for the first time. After a perfectly normal response to seeing the horrors of the afterlife, we take a look around this museum dedicated to Professor Kunihiko Aso, the inventor of the camera obscura. Turns out he visited this island many years ago, the 1910s to be exact, and he left the camera here. Before picking it up, we heard the second door shake, and we saw the shape of a face on the wood. This is like when people see the face of Jesus in Toast. Madoka manages to zoom in with the camera, which is not something you can do in normal gameplay, and she takes a photo of a ghost right before it attacks her. This leads to the combat tutorial. This fight was, unfortunately, a bit of a joke, since we had the fully upgraded camera, and this ghost doesn't have much health anyway. We'll get a better look in a bit. As Madoka tries to leave, a ghostly hand grabs her wrist. She's been surrounded, and she slowly slumps to the ground. The chapter ends with a shot of the full moon. Poor Madoka, she literally had no idea what was going on at any stage. Chapter 1 begins with our next playable character, Ruka Minazuki, playing a piano and explaining her past. She doesn't remember anything about her childhood, her family home, or even her father. All she remembers is the faint memory of a melody.
つの旋律。
She's on her way to Rogetsu Isle to investigate the disappearance of her and 4 others 10 years ago. Since 2 of them, Marie and Tomoe, have died suddenly, and the other 2, Misaki and Madoka, travelled to the island previously but never returned. She arrives at the old building and slowly walks inside. I adore this intro. The sound design here is impeccable. The music building to a crescendo in the piano segment, the bursts of sound on the reveal of Rogetsu Hall, and the flashback of Ruka's past self, it really helps set the tone of what's to come. Also, fun fact, on the initial release of this game, the title card said Fatal Frame, even though in Europe the series is known as Project Zero. I honestly didn't think they'd fix that, but hey, I'm glad they did. Maybe we should strive for some consistency in the future, however. Chapter 1 is The Summoning. Ruka will have this exact facial expression for the entire game, and honestly, I get it. If I was in this situation, I would look the same. And immediately we get a tutorial for Snap Mode. This is a new feature for the remaster, and it's just a photo studio. I literally never touched it. We come across our first save point, which are these paper lantern things. They auto-save when you pass by them, but they can also be used to trade points for useful items, additional camera lenses, and costumes. Some of these costumes are... yeah, they can be a bit much. Our first objective is to search the general area, and you'll notice that this sign has English text on it. As far as I'm aware, this is the only sign in the game to actually have English text. All the rest is Japanese, which isn't too much of an issue, however, since the map is very easy to use, and it's very well labelled. At the top of the stairs, we find a note jammed in between the doors. Turns out Madoka's been writing cryptic notes and put them in door frames again. A lot of the game's lore and story is revealed and expanded on using these notes, and I have to say the writing is amazing. They're especially good when you see characters start to panic or lose their minds. After descending the stairs, we see Madoka pass by, and I really like how Ruka's voice sounds so far away here. I think it adds to the empty feeling that this place has. Oh yeah, this is the door that the flashlight usually glitches through. Yeah, there's a couple of glitches like that throughout, nothing game breaking or anything, so I don't mind too much. Madoka's back in the museum again since she's such a history buff, so we follow her in. There are additional notes here now, including a newspaper clipping stating that literally the entire population of the island has either died or gone missing, and some more notes from Dr. Aso talking about how important masks are. And that camera flash actually got me the first time through. The game works on atmosphere and tension a lot, but it also does have a couple of jump scares thrown in too. Before picking up the camera, I actually noticed that the face on the adjacent door is gone. Now that's creepy. Maybe Madoka is just upset that we picked up her camera without asking. The door she just rudely slammed in our faces is closed, even though, as Ruka points out, it's not even locked, and we have to take a picture of the supernatural presence in front of it in order to find a way to open it. This system has been a staple throughout the series, and it's used a good few times throughout the game. I quite like it since it means you aren't just searching blindly, and it can be nice to have a visual clue to look for or remember, rather than just picking up a note that tells you where the key is. The photo shows us 5 masks hanging on a wall, so we need to go look for clues there. Also in this room, we come across one of my issues with the flashlight system. Sometimes you'll walk around a room and hear the audio cue for an item popping up, but you won't be able to see it and you'll have to search the room for it. This didn't happen too often, but whenever it did, I really found myself struggling to find things, although that could just be me going blind. Filament in the bottom left hand corner will also light up to let you know if there's an item or an interactable object near. Even still, it can be hard to find their exact locations. We also come across our first spirit stones. Blue ones are used to upgrade the camera obscura's basic functions, and red ones are used to upgrade the special lenses, which each have unique functions. There aren't enough of these stones to completely upgrade absolutely everything in one playthrough, so New Game Plus carries these over. There are also several different kinds of film that you can pick up. Higher numbers of film usually meaning higher damage. There are also special upgrades, such as an alarm that sounds when you can make a fatal frame shot. This room is also when I first employed my trusty method of pointing the camera around in order to find items, which is so much easier than the alternative. We also encountered our first Hozuki doll. There's one of these in every area of the game. They're usually well hidden, and if you can take photos of enough of them, you unlock additional lenses for purchase or new costumes for your characters. There's also an audio cue for them using a special New Game Plus enhancement, so they're a lot easier to find this time around. After leaving the room, Ruka sees a ghost and we enter our second encounter of the game. The combat is pretty simple. You point the camera at a ghost's face, the camera will charge up, you take a photo when it's at full charge to unleash a powerful attack that will knock the ghost back and repeat until it's down. You can also unleash an incredibly powerful attack called a fatal frame, which has a narrow window of opportunity just before a ghost tries to attack you. This is easier to pull off in certain ghosts than others, and I tried and failed here, but I think I was just a little bit too close, so the timing was even tighter. This nurse isn't too aggressive, but we'll be coming across her again, don't worry. Moving back into the main hall, we come across our first hidden ghost, or a revenant as the ghostess calls it. Some of these, including this one, can only be seen in New Game Plus, and they require precise angles and distancing in order to see, which results in a lot of time making slight adjustments to find the perfect spot. The filament at the top of the screen gives a general direction, but not much more than that. After realizing this was not the way to progress, we double back towards the room with the lift. Here we saw our first of the spectres, ghosts which will appear in front of you at various points throughout the game, indicated by a yellow light on the filament. Conversely, hostile ghosts, known as wraiths, will show a red filament. Usually these will either be scares or they'll lead you towards your next destination, so it's always a good idea to follow these when they show up. We followed this little boy into the dining room, where we gained the key to the cupboard under the stairs. The dining room itself is really nice actually. It's got a nice piano, a projector and screen, and generally looks like it would have been luxurious back when it wasn't abandoned and full of ghosts. I would have liked to have had a meal here. On said piano, we find another note from Madoka. Looks like she's not having a great time. At the far end of the hall, we find the 5 masks from the photo, but one of them is missing. And then I missed a photo of the boy running away, so no 100% ghost list for me, yet again. Following him leads us back to the main hall, where he shows himself behind the locked gate upstairs. Thankfully we got the cupboard key earlier, which leads to the switch needed to open said gate. This cupboard is a neat room. It is cramped, however, which really shows the controls at their worst, but it's got some cool items in here, like the giant peacock and the corpse wrapped in bandages. Swear it didn't move in normal mode. Ruka barely reacts to that though. We have a new entry in the IDGAF wars here. Puzzle we have here involves flipping switches in order to reach the correct code, which is 13 as we saw in the note earlier. I swear, I did not check a guide for this. The solution was purely accidental. I spent ages trying to get this last time. It's a simple concept, the puzzles are never too complicated. Leaving the cupboard, we hear the phone ring, and the phones still work and nobody has a mobile phone since this all takes place in 1980. Listening to these calls throughout the game gives a little bit of creepy dialogue, sometimes a little insight into the inner thoughts of certain characters. I have literally no idea who this is though. As we enter the corridor containing patient rooms, we find another note from Madoka. At this stage it's clear she's losing her mind, and I like how the spacing of the words in the notes help indicate this. We follow the boy into his room since all the other doors are locked, and we're greeted by the first in a series of incredible rooms. Patient rooms are designed great. The personality of the inhabitant shines right through. In this case, the boy, Kazuto, is a kleptomaniac. You can see all kind of things littered throughout the room. Dolls, radios, mannequin parts. It's revealed later on that the patients are encouraged to indulge in their wants and desires in order to help improve their conditions, which, in my opinion, isn't the best medical advice, but hey, I'm not a psychiatrist. Nor are any people in this game. Anyway, mask we need is on the ground, and as Ruka goes to pick it up, the boy attacks. We're officially introduced to the concept of fatal frames here, and in this confined space, I made apparently 0 attempts to land any. I also want to mention at this stage that these fights are loud. The sounds are creepy ambience along with the ghosts wailing and lamenting, but it is much louder than anything else in this game, which does indeed add to the tension, but if you're playing with headphones on, which I highly recommend you do, it can get a bit much. Now, during this fight, the ghost blossoms. This is indicated by the ghost's face becoming blurry, and they'll start to move quicker and hit harder, although he goes down straight after this, so no big deal really. This system directly corresponds to the symptoms of the condition the patients here are being treated for, but we'll see more about that later. Main thing here is that we get the mask back, even if we are stealing part of what made that boy whole. Heading back to the dining room, we get attacked by a random ghost on the way, which can happen, and I do think it's scripted since I never had an encounter this run that I didn't remember from last time. Anyway, we put the mask back, and the seal on the museum door is broken, so we head over. On the way, we look at some health and safety violations, and fight another random man ghost. I actually managed to hit a few fatal frames here, and defeated him with a combo. I love the animations ghosts have with the fatal frame shots. They seem like they have a lot of force behind them. The ghosts actually seem like they're in a lot of pain. It's pretty cool. That was a weird sentence to say. The unlocked door leads to the library. You can examine the bookshelves in order to see some book titles here, but more importantly, we find Madoka in the corner of the room, her face in her hands. Ruka reaches out to her, but unfortunately we're too late. She's blossomed, her face distorted, and she attacks us. The fight itself isn't too difficult, but she does begin by lunging at you, so that can be tricky to dodge. Hard to tell, but when she passes through the bookshelf, some books will actually fall off the shelf onto the ground, which is neat, but also she's a ghost, why is she doing that? Madoka actually blossomed during this fight for me, which is a random occurrence as far as I can tell, and that was neat considering she did so before the fight in the cutscene. After defeating her friend, Ruka looks into the mirror and briefly sees her face distorted. Seems there's more at work here than simply a supernatural. Chapter ends with another shot of the moon. Chapter 2 begins in the same moments that we began the prelude. Madoka and Misaki have just arrived at Rogetsu Hall. Turns out, Misaki saw her face distort in the mirror, similar to the way we just saw Ruka, explaining her haste in coming to the island. The girl appears in her shadow, beckoning her to the aisle, and she appears again on the stairs in front of Misaki. Misaki approaches, reaching her hand forward before seemingly collapsing. She comes to at the top of the main stairway, confused and lost. It's nice to know it wasn't her decision to leave Madoka behind. Chapter 2 is named Resonance, and we take control of Misaki Aso. And if you're wondering, yes, it is that same Aso. Misaki is a descendant of the Dr. Kunihiko Aso, who invented the camera obscura, meaning she was able to bring one with her from home. An incredible piece of foresight on her part.
Right? I got that thing on me. I got that stick. I got that tool. I'm packing.
Our first objective is to find Madoka, which is a nice move on Misaki's part, but who's gonna tell her? Inside the nurse's station, we can listen to Madoka plead for help from the patient intercoms. Seems she's made her way back to her room. We pick up a single blue spirit stone, which honestly was not even worth my time, and 2F patient room assignments. Turns out Madoka's room is on this floor, but she was being bullied from before. There's also details of some other patients, including one who's barricaded their doors shut, another whose memories are fading, the boy from the last chapter, and a particularly badly behaved child named Ayako. Actually, I don't think badly behaved is the right phrase. She's more like a psychopath, hurting others with no remorse, including physically injuring the nursing staff. She'll be coming up a lot, remember her. We also find the patients like to make a game of figuring out the code to unlock the doors here. You'll notice that not many people that work here were actually very good at their jobs. Going downstairs, we see a vision of some young girls playing. It's worth mentioning at this point that not all of the spectres we see are ghosts. A lot of them will be memories of these characters from 10 years ago. Sometimes the lines between death and life can get a bit blurred. Under the cupboard we find this god-awful drawing of a clock. I would understand if it was drawn by a 4-year-old, but these girls are supposed to be 7. Where's your talent and ability? The grandfather clock outside will chime to remind you it's there in case you forgot, and Misaki will sense something at the bottom, hinting that she has some spiritual potential, something that will become relevant later. The photo at the bottom of the clock gives the code to open the patient corridor, so we head up and open it. The switch is like a rotating dial sort of thing, like a safe. Why didn't I just make it a keypad? That would be so much easier. We enter the code and get another message from Madoka. And the nurse attacks us again. I swear, this ghost attacks every single time you enter this room. Doesn't she have anything better to be doing? Do you like that the charging symbols for Misaki's cameras are different to Ruka's, since this one is a prototype of the finished model. This is also Misaki's first real encounter with a hostile ghost, and she barely reacts. She just gasps for a bit and then gets over it right after the fight, and honestly, I get it. In the corridor, we can find a revenant of a lady hanging, and also find her suicide note. Again, as I said before, this game can get pretty dark, and there's literally no one involved here that leaves unscathed. Madoka can also be heard crying at her door, but it's locked. Misaki barely reacts to this ghost exiting the room, and I love how this cutscene is framed. The bandaged ghost leaving the room is the main focus, while the one behind Misaki only pops up the end, just long enough to be noticed. You'll notice here I actually managed to pull off an evade on this ghost's attack. This will be the only time I remember that function exists. Yet again, these initial ghosts can be easily dispatched with a few fatal frames, and the majority of any hits you're going to take are going to be due to the confined space. We take a photo of Madoka's door, leading us back to the museum library. Oh, sorry, a room filled with books. Misaki, be serious, you know what a library is. On the way, we see a girl at the top of the stairs telling us to die. She seems nice. Outside the museum, I actually managed to miss seeing the mask falling off the wall jump scare, but the noise did make me jump a bit. This random man appears behind us as we approach the mirror and we have to fight. This fight is the first time I noticed the filament lighting up in all directions, meaning you have to search around for the ghost, although usually they just stand in place until the jump scare audio cue goes off. After picking up the key and heading to the door, a blossomed woman appears beside the masks and we're unable to leave. Moving towards her reveals a mask fragment and a note talking about the Kagura, a festival which in ancient times brought about the Day of Tranquility, although we get zero details on it. Doesn't sound too bad actually, surely tranquility is a good thing. Anyway, in the main hall, we see a girl collapsed on the ground at the foot of the staircase, and the evil girl from before laughing at the top. The implication here is awful, and honestly, I'm surprised the girl survived that drop. That's a lot of stairs. The nurse station intercom goes off again, and oh my god, you need to get a hobby. I'm so glad we did that fight to get some static. Inside Madoka's room is incredible. Various notes indicated that Madoka liked to draw, so the walls are plastered in crayon drawings, most of which are horrific depictions of scary faces, tall women, and shadowy figures. We also come across some childhood diaries Madoka left behind. Approaching the mirror gives us a scene of a ghost approaching Misaki from behind and then disappearing. It took me so long to figure out who this ghost was, since I never actually ended up finding them in either playthrough, since honestly I forgot to look my second time through. They're actually the lady who drowned that's been mentioned in several notes before, Tomoko, and you have to kinda go out of your way a bit to find her. We also find a letter from Madoka's mother talking about her pet canary. Oh lord, this pet canary, please get ready folks. Apparently Madoka's mother died at some point according to the wiki, but I can't figure out where that information came from, so take that with a pinch of salt. Further in, we see Madoka sitting on her bed. Taking a photo revealed an image of her as a child, revealing that she was that girl we just saw collapsed on the ground. On approach, she disappears, leaving behind a nurse's logbook, talking about how, please be prepared, Ayako from room 207 beheaded Madoka's pet canary with a pair of scissors, showing zero remorse. I honestly feel so bad for Madoka. She was bullied so much by this one girl, and she got kidnapped or something. Then 10 years later her friends died, and then she died after trying to help her friend. It sucks so much for her. Our next port of call is to investigate this Ayako child and give her some morals or something. On our way to her room, we see the nurse getting literally dragged across the floor by her scalp, and since they have to give Ayako special treatment for some reason, there's nothing any of the staff can do about her behaviour. Ayako's room has to be my favourite room in the game, with the adjacent room being a close second. We don't get much time to spend here in this chapter, but the atmosphere here is amazing. The haunting laughs in the soundscape, the light thrown across the room from the lantern ornament thing. I absolutely adore this place. Oh, there's also the mannequin parts and arms hanging from the ceiling. Those are horrifying. After walking forward about 4 steps, Misaki takes a great interest in the lantern thing because why wouldn't you? I want to know what that is. Ayako then falls from the ceiling and takes off half of my health, and she's one of the only few ghosts that will damage the player every single time that they appear. The fight itself here is really fun actually. She's a creepy ghost child, she's an incredibly creepy face whenever you deal damage to her, and the hanging arms really add to the entire experience. It's not that difficult though. After putting the child back into her grave, our mysterious lady appears. She touches Misaki's face and we receive a vision.
忘れたの一緒にいるよ私がいれば大丈夫ずっと一緒にいようね大丈夫だから
Chapter ends with the moon shining down on the isle once more. Chapter 3 begins with Ruka's mother, Sayaka, telling a random man who I want to call me that Ruka has gone back to the island and implores him to follow and bring her back. This man is Choshiro Kirishima, and he wakes up on the ground outside the infirmary. Sir, get up from there, it's dirty. We find a notebook on the ground, and turns out that Choshiro is the man that discovered the group of girls that went missing 10 years ago, and this chapter is titled The Lost Day. Turns out the girls were found underneath the infirmary itself, which is slightly incriminating for the hospital. Inside, Choshiro comes across a ghost almost immediately, but instead of a camera obscura, he comes with a spirit stone flashlight that Sayaka had for some reason. This thing is far more powerful than the camera. It's very good at crowd control, and you will encounter many more groups of ghosts rather than just single ghosts. And it'll take them out in 1 or 2 hits max. I don't find it as fun to use though, I just think the camera feels better. Choshiro is here on the island to chase after Yo Haibara, a man who is linked to the facilities and the girl's disappearance somehow, and also because Choshiro is down horrendous for Sayaka, something that's made quite obvious during some of his investigation notes. Here we're investigating the more medical side of Rogetsu Hall, known as Haibara Infirmary, and we get the first mention of the Moonlight Syndrome, a mental condition that is unique to this island, resulting in severe memory loss and also loss of identity, resulting ultimately in death or suicide, and for which there is no known cure, which has not dissuaded the staff from looking for one for any method necessary. Patients also seek out the sanctity of the moonlight, since it apparently gives them a sense of safety. Going through the wards, we come across a diary from a girl who was coerced into surgery she didn't want, which has now made her feel worse, so I'm starting to think maybe this isn't the most ethical place in the world. Follow the ghost of the director's assistant into the hospital smoking area, get glitched in the corner of a door frame, and in the 70s I'm sure an area like this was normal, but looking at this in 2023 is wild. And that fight with the random ghost really shows off the power of this weapon. This medical note says don't tell the patient or anyone else about this. That sounds bad. Oh, that curtain was foul. Some of the textures in this game really don't look great when you zoom in, which is unfortunate when it's a game about cameras. There's a note in the clean room, which isn't very clean, that talks about the last remaining survivor of Rogetsu calling out for their mother in their final moments, something we should remember for later. Oh, do we have to look around the surgery theatre? I don't really want to do that. The table appears to have someone lying on it, so obviously we have to look closer. Thankfully it's just a load of her, which the owner obviously wants back. After the fight we get another diary from the girl, which is so sad and scary to read honestly. And then the post-mortem, which says the cause of death is unknown. I think the experimental surgery might be a contributing factor, maybe? I'm not a doctor though. We get a note talking about the Rogetsu Kagura, festival held every 10 years involving a vessel dancing to appease the souls of the dead, surrounded by 5 organs, providing musical accompaniment. And today would have been the day of the festival, if there was anyone left to celebrate it, that is. The assistant has shoved another key into his research notes, so we head towards the exam room. And now we get to fight him. This man is screaming. Sir, please, you need to calm down. This ghost is unique since he can try and use his pen light to temporarily blind you, which is a fun touch. Turns out this man was the informer that told the police where the disappeared girls were. Maybe he was good in the end after all. Haibara uses the lift to go downstairs as we look on, and I honestly don't know why we can't just use the lift as well, considering it obviously works. Anyway, we go into the exam room, where we find a patient interview tape. There are several of these in the game, which are between the patient and the hospital's director, and they're kinda horrific. Bad bedside manners here. Also, there's a pillow that's a perfect cuboid here. That's not comfortable looking. The next set of assistant's notes are concerned that the staff aren't using proper medical terminology, which is valid of course, but I would have bigger concerns personally. This is where you get the definitions of budding, but blossoming is still a mystery, but like, you can tell that's the end times. Outside, we get our first encounter with the ghost hand. This is why the pickup animations are so long. There's a low enough chance to see this, and you get very little reaction time to dodge, but it can be done. If it gets you, you'll just lose the item you were reaching for, but you'll never lose anything important, just like spirit stones. Inside his office, the director is talking about the rite of descent, the true form of the Kagura. That sounds like a Project Zero ritual if I've ever heard one. Downstairs we can get a puzzle, which is both Sudoku and a riddle, and I managed to work it out quick enough on my first playthrough, But for some reason, I missed the intercom in the director's office for so long. So yeah, you have to input it into the desk, you're welcome. This will open the super secret room behind the cabinet, which leads to the super secret brain surgery room. This is where they did brain surgery on that grape, and there seem to be torture devices / therapy aids sitting around. I want to get an inspector in here please, I don't think this goes by health and safety standards. Further down, we come to the bottom of the well, where the girls were found 10 years ago. Flashback Haruka mentions the rite of descent. Choshiro is shocked that she's still not there, and the chapter ends. We're back to Ruka now, and thankfully from this point on, there are plot summaries between chapters, which is great if you've taken a break or simply forgot what the other characters are doing. Music plays over the intercom again, and Ruka has an intense reaction, remembering writhing in pain on her bed, but also while wearing a mask. I'm starting to think maybe remembering might not be good for these girls' mental health. Chapter 4 is called Void, and we get another note from Madoka. She's so crazy, love her. So we enter the main hallway, we encounter that nurse again, and the music plays yet again. We need to turn this off for both Ruka and my own sanity. I do love the visuals here, we're getting uncomfortable vibes from both a visual and audio standpoint, so good. After turning off that racket, we find out this was actually an alternative therapy and it actually did produce a reaction in the patients. A bad one. Really bad. Maybe they shouldn't do that anymore. Oh, who am I kidding? They definitely did it about 1 million more times. Ayako makes some demands over the intercom and we have to fight that nurse again. Get a hobby. Find a new job. Please lady, just leave me alone. On the way over to Ayako's room, I decided to look into Madoka's room, since you can find additional notes and documents in rooms you cleared in previous chapters, and we do find one of Madoka's diaries. Now it's over. Madoka really is one of the greatest tragedies of this story. In Ayako's room, which is as great as ever, we find Ayako's confidential GDPR breaching medical notes, to note that her psychopathic and violent tendencies may stem from her Moonlight Syndrome, taking away her sense of morality. And since this facility has a policy of letting patients indulge in what makes them feel sane, she can do whatever she wants, I guess. Now to go to this tiny door and... why did she have to do that? After fighting her off, we enter my second favourite room in the game. The sounds here are horrifying. Sound is probably the straining of the strings surrounding the bed here, but you could be forgiven for interpreting them as a death rattle. We find some sheet music, meaning it's time to look for the giant piano in the dining room. Also, we can open the curtains here to reveal Ayako on the bed, and you definitely could not do that in normal mode. On the way to the dining room, Madoka gives us another call. I think she's over it. Actually, I don't know why, but I just got reminded of another Wii horror game that was all about mobile phones. And that's a game I'd like to check out someday. Oh, there's the lady in black. She scares me a lot. Once we reach the piano, we get to do the piano minigame, which is easy enough. You just need to press the correct buttons in time with the music, but it tells you exactly which ones to press when. We'll do this a couple of times, and it's pretty fun. To me. Ruka remembers the route to her room from all those years ago, so we go to look at the lift. The woman in black walks out with her damn doll, and she drops a letter suggesting she may have some issues she needs to work through, but that's kind of par for the course at this stage. Turns out the lift isn't even on, and we need to activate the switchboard. Guess who has the switchboard key? Outside in the courtyard, Ruka just walks up and tries to grab the ghost in the wheelchair, and I really don't understand her obsession with touching ghosts. This boss fight is against Kagari Sendo, the lady in black, and her doll, known as Me. This fight's pretty scary actually. Lady herself isn't that bad, but the doll will move towards you at speed, can't be knocked back, and even if you do deplete its health, it'll just get back up again. Attacking the doll will make Send more aggressive towards you, so the best strategy is to take out the doll and hit some fatal frames when you get the chance. Eventually, they'll both go down. Really cool first proper boss fight here, and our reward is a switchboard room key. Emerging from the underground is a lady in red who is clearly blossomed. They touch you, you will die in one hit, so just run. Don't even look at her, just run. I love the fact that the visuals get incredibly dark here, and the haunting laughs really help get the urgency of the situation across. If you attempt to take a photo, it'll just get ruined, so don't even bother. Down in the switchboard room, there's a nurse desk here for some reason, and her notes have the code to the 3rd floor. Don't know why she's down here, but hey, they must have their reasons. Switchboard puzzle is another number flipping one, and I got it really quickly again. I am so good at puzzles, I have the mind of a mastermind. A ghost will go through this really mouldy room, and it will tell us the living shall not enter. Well, I'm gonna go anyway. The next door is locked, and we get attacked for trying. You people in this place should try and be a bit more friendly. Turns out that room is where they remove the faces of Blossom people so the condition doesn't spread. Oops. The lady in red attacks as we go back upstairs, and she can teleport really close to you, but keep moving and it'll be okay. On the 3rd floor, we come across an impassable obstacle. A red wheelchair. Ruka, you could literally squeeze around it. Please make an attempt at least. We find the room assignments, and turns out Misaki's room is up here too, and she's getting personal treatment from the director. That can't be good. The chapter ends with Ruka outside her old bedroom. Familiar, like a smell.
Okay. Whatever that means.
Chapter 5, Twin Faces, brings us back to Misaki, who has been staring at this wall for about an hour, and she's just remembered she still doesn't know where Madoka is. Guess those arms are alive, huh? The mystery lady wants us to go into the secret room, and we find a note from Ayako, which seems to detail the horrific thoughts she had after seeing a Blossom person. And the fact that she mentions both Yo and her mother here seems to imply that the final survivor from the island, mentioned in an earlier chapter, may well have been Ayako herself. The next door has a photo puzzle, which leads us back into the previous room, so we get the key and have to yet again fight Ayako inside the 4-poster bedroom, which is the smallest space so far, and to make matters worse, she blossoms. Thank God this is a fun fight. In the next room, we find a hidden revenant of a head specimen. I don't want to know if this is real or fake actually, I think I'm better off in ignorance. We find a video recording of the Kagura from 10 years ago, and from the notes we find, it seems this is the room belonging to Yo Haibara. I don't like the fact that the staff are aware of this room's existence, as we found out in a previous note from the last chapter. He's also apparently asked Ayako about the other girls in the facility, specifically noting down details about Ruka, Madoka, and Misaki. Interesting. The only place we know of with a projector is the dining room, so we head down there. After watching, Misaki remembers she was taken away during the Kagura, but the rest is still fragmented. Madoka is back, and she's pissed, swinging at us straight away. This is the same fight as before, and afterwards she leaves behind a surprisingly coherent note. Turns out she lived with Misaki, but felt like a replacement for her special friend, and wished Misaki would just move on, but she's going back to her room, so it's okay. It's okay. The two of them can die together. We decide to follow Madoka's advice and go back to Misaki's room, and the lift is working now. This does kind of bring the timeline of events into question, since Misaki and Madoka came to the island before Ruka, but hey, it's a game about ghosts, we can suspend disbelief. The nurse's station here has an interview tape between Misaki and the director. I don't like this man, but we again get a mention of Misaki being a medium, confirming that she has some spiritual potential.
私、お姉ちゃんと同じなの？言ってたよ。同じだって。霊媒だって。
There's also this creepy poster that reminds me of Shinji Evangelion. Anyway, we get to Misaki's room and, surprise surprise, it's locked. Photo we took shows that... Oh great, it's a wheelchair. Wonderful. On the way to the very blocked corridor, we see various visions of 3 young girls running in front of us, who I can only assume are Ruka, Madoka, and Misaki. Trio are creeping on this random person's room, but I guess when you wheel around a human-sized doll all day, the children will be curious. This room is a spectacle in design. The coffin in the middle is the obvious pull of attention, with the scurry mannequin and its skirts, photos on the wall and flowers. It feels very like a funeral home. Main highlight has to be the side room, the many coffins and the hidden revenant inside. We pick up the key from the chair, eager to leave as soon as possible, but it turns out we're trapped. And now we have to fight me once again. However, something's different here. The doll is being knocked back by the photos and it's very human-like in its defeat. Combining this with the hidden revenant, and I don't think this is a normal doll. Back inside Misaki's room, we find some research records that have literally 0 information in them, and her medical records, which tell us that her diagnosis is severe, and she's having a really bad time with her Moonlight Syndrome, just like one of the other patients. Huh. Okay, these are Misaki's medical notes. Can we leave the other girls out of it? Thank you. We get a flashback of Misaki being given her treatment with a medieval torture device, and then we get attacked by the director's assistant, and my personal favourite of the nurse designs. Her eyes are just so wide and horrifying, and the colour is so piercing. Her expression is just horrifying. After their defeat, we find a koi panel which can be used to solve the box puzzle on the bedside table. It's not hard if you work from the middle panel out, and inside is a random key and a photo of young Misaki with a woman whose face has been blurred. We get a scene of Misaki singing some seemingly random numbers walking down a hallway, which leads her to the room of a young woman. Misaki doesn't remember who she was, and the chapter ends. Chapter 6, Moon Song, is back with Ruka. She's been staring at this door for the past 30 minutes. It's blocked, so it's not like she could have went in anyway. The photo we take shows us a painting of 5 maidens, and a wet-looking man shows us the way. I went into Misaki's room to look for secrets, and got a radio recording of young Ruka talking about the masks her father makes her wear, and that her parents are always fighting.
Divorce.
Next is the gallery, the place where the generous donor to the facility hangs up his paintings, where we find the painting we need, and when we take a photo of it, the resulting image has the maidens with smudged faces, and some creepy moans in the background. Ruka's room key falls out the back of the frame for some reason. We have to go through the painter's bedroom to progress, and as we go in, we see him going insane on the floor, taking finger painting to the extreme. He might be dead and unstable, but he knows how to make a beautiful painting. Oh, and going by his notes, he has also lost his mind. Lovely. This bathtub is filthy. I don't think this man's ever used this. Inside Ruka's room, there's a constant wooden clacking sound, which is actually caused by her wardrobe door swinging open. We see a memory of Ruka playing the piano, and also one of her writhing in pain during her musical therapy sessions. We find a cassette tape of an interview with Ruka, and I don't really know if they had parental consent to be carrying out this stuff. I actually spent quite a while looking for the next item we needed here, which is Ruka's diary, which was just beside her pillow. I kept looking at the chair since there's an item there in a later chapter, and my memory is playing with me. Suddenly, the music box starts playing even though it's missing a cog, which as it turns out is inside Misaki's room. After we pick it up, we have to fight the assistant again. I am so sick of this man, please leave me alone, sir. Now we have to rearrange the cogs inside the music box in order to fix it. I find this quite difficult actually, since I don't have a degree in mechanical engineering, but brute force is certainly enough to make this work after a while. It plays the same melody as the piano playing from earlier, then we have to do another minigame on the big piano here. Ruka sees a flashback of her mother watching her play, and we end up in a mysterious house which I can only assume is Ruka's old home. Looking around, we find a few diary entries and see Sayaka overlooking the garden. Turns out this is the moment Sayaka discovered Ruka had moonlight syndrome. She's standing down there, staring at the full moon. There are also some diary entries from her about how different her husband is these days. Guess they are getting a divorce.
Well, divorce.
Ruka finds a photo of a man who might be her father, and we get a scene of him making a mask, but it cuts off just before we see his face. Then we're back in Rogetsu Hall. Ruka bends down to pick something off the floor and notices some things underneath her bed, including another diary entry which really made me quite upset, honestly. She mentions her condition making her forget, meaning people who died go away, and she's starting to forget her father. The line, "The daddy in my head is going to die," really struck me. The kind father she used to know will be gone, and even though he's still alive, he's a completely different person now. That one line just really affected me. There's also a mask here, and turns out it's the one they put on Ruka when she was kidnapped. Why did you keep this? I would have thrown that out. She sees a woman in a memory, and makes the connection in her mind that maybe she's the same person that was blossomed down in the courtyard. The key we picked up earlier is used to open one of Sayaka's diaries, which we find in the nurse's station. This 12-page epic is when she finally decided to leave her husband on the island behind, after finding out the director Haibara and her husband most likely both had a hand in her daughter's disappearance, and the subsequent almost complete destruction of her mental state. Which is so valid, I would do the same. Here Ruka finds out exactly where she was found, making that our next destination. There are also some nurses' notes, mentioning that as well as patients disappearing, there are also some deaths. A nurse will jump scare you after reading this, and I'm almost certain she was put there to make sure you got the items in the cabinet behind her. Even though we now know where we want to go, at this stage we're not quite sure how exactly to get there.
So,
No, I'm saying
what now?
So the best course of action is to wander around blindly until we figure it out. Taking the lift downstairs, we almost immediately run into the blossomed woman from before, so surely where we want to go is beyond her. She disappears as soon as we leave the room, but I decided to take the longer route around, just in case. The way forward is through these large double doors, the only ones we haven't actually gone through yet, and of course they're locked. Who has been locking all of these doors? The key is down in the switchboard room, and we see the blossomed woman on our way. She doesn't mind this time though, she's got places to be, even ghosts have routines. The key is in the weird hole, and the nurse that worked there looks at us when we pick it up, and attacks when I try to pick up her things. You really get a good look at her horrific face here. Turns out she's been watching over a patient who should, by all means, not be alive, but she is, and the nurse is terrified that one day she's going to wake up. And now we get my personal favourite radio clip. Very clear something awful has happened at the last Kagura, apart from the child kidnapping of course, and this woman is hanging on by a thread. I particularly love the ending section of the radio, where there's so much noise the entire time, and when the door finally opens, it's simply silence. Sound design knocking it out of the park yet again. We enter the connecting passage and get attacked by a random guy and also someone wearing the torture device. Obviously it didn't help him get better then. This hallway is a direct connection between the Haibara Infirmary and Rugetsu Hall, which is an intense change of scenery. If you go into the wards on the left here, you get to see an optional scene of Ruka being attacked by a ghost arm, which doesn't even lead to a fight, but we do get a full healing item out of it. We take the lift down to the bottom of the well, and Ruka instantly remembers being there, mentioning that she feels like she's melting away in the moonlight. Ruka's just having these full-scale conversations with herself. She's just like me. The chapter ends, and you may notice that we're on a half moon now, or third quarter if you want the technical term. The moon is slowly but surely getting smaller as we move on. Chapter 7, Tranquility, brings us back to Choshiro, who was also at the bottom of the well, but Ruka isn't here. I spent several minutes running around looking for an invisible item on the ground before moving into the next room. The tunnel down here is partially blocked, but we can't move on since the collapse of Choshiro's ass cheeks might disrupt the tunnel's integrity. We do find a note though which mentions the Day of Tranquility again, which does sound like a nice time, but they don't seem to have enjoyed it very much. On the way back up, Choshiro notes that the director's office connects here. Yeah, we know, that's literally the route we took down here. We then get attacked by several masked villagers, and when we finish, the lift automatically takes us to the B1 floor, where a nurse leads us towards the morgue. In here we find a corpse that has had its face removed, and a mask put in place instead. We'd seen mention of this before, but to actually see it in practice is scary. Turns out this lady got agitated at the same time as the Kagura, something we need to look into. A pile of bin bags at the side mentioned the burning of patient documents containing errors, which is actually a medical offence, and the back door key is here. Why were you throwing that out? Don't people need to lock that door? There's also the corpse of Tsubaki Tono, the nurse that was in charge of the third floor of Rogetsu Hall, and who was also the vessel in the recent Kagura. Turns out she died very suddenly during the dance, even though her body was perfectly healthy. We already knew something weird was going on, but this just confirms it. Her spirit leads us onwards again, but the power of this great thing is off, and the photo we take shows us a switchboard. Thank you, that does not help me at all. We go the only other available route, and we're confronted with the lady hanging from the ceiling. Love her design, hate the circumstances she was placed in. Even if you're already morally corrupt in your treatment of your patients, I don't know how anyone would expect to get away with literally hanging a patient upside down from the ceiling. We can look at these little peepholes at the side to see her wrapped up body hanging there. Anyway, we turn on the power and see Yo head into the director's office. We also find a note that talks about the 5 girls who were kidnapped, confirming they were used to conduct this rite of descent we keep hearing about. Turns out that Tomoe and Maria were outpatients, which explains why we haven't found anything related to them in the facility. Further documents confirm that Ruka's father was the one to make the mask of the Lunar Eclipse used in this ritual, and another mentions that this rite of descent is being done to help cure the director's daughter, someone we haven't seen mention of yet, although Yo has mentioned a sister at one point. Eventually we arrive at the back door and exit towards the large incinerator. Next to it, we see some bags full of human hands. Lovely. At the top of the incinerator itself, we find a shoddily burned pile of letters addressed to Choshiro himself, which are 27 pages long, and are from a university friend talking about their mask research and ultimate diagnosis with Moonlight Syndrome. We then move up the path towards the graveyard, following Tsubaki once again. At the top, we find her diary, which again made me upset, since she had only recently moved to the island and she was so excited to be chosen as the vessel, only for the worst to occur. We also get a film reel, and if you're quick, you can see Tsubaki standing there in her vessel attire. On the way down, some villagers attack, but they will literally spawn forever, so unless you need some points, just run back inside. At this point, our only real lead is to go and watch this film, so we head towards the dining room. On the way, we see Yo walking ahead of us several times, letting us know, yes, this is the right way to go. The film shows the Kagura festival from that day, including the moment when the vessel collapsed and died. I was wondering in my first playthrough why no one seemed to care about the kids surrounding her that also collapsed, since there's never really any mention of them, but turns out they didn't actually die here. There were certainly horrible effects on their bodies, yes. For example, one of them never laughed again, but they didn't die. A pair of feet appear beneath the screen, which I assume belong to Tsubaki, but I'm not really 100% sure. This leads us to find a burned oil painting, meaning it's time to go back to the painter's room. On the way, I decided to head back to Yo's secret room, and we find a note mentioning his sister may be in the state she's currently in, after performing as a vessel in a previous Kagura. And then he talks about Ayako being scolded, and the director mentioning she's just like Yo when she was young. Keep that in mind. We then see Ayako struggling on her bed and have to fight her again passing back through. And then I realise that I could have just avoided that whole thing by going through the other door. Amazing. The painter's room and the gallery are both locked, so I went into Ruka's room instead. Sayaka is here, and we find a photo of a group and a diary of her intentions to leave the island. And then the assistant attacks again.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
The painter's room is open now for some reason, and we get attacked almost immediately. During the fight he will move really fast while crawling along the floor, but he'll also stand up. He's not so tough though. Afterwards, Choshiro will look at the painting on the floor, and remember seeing a blossomed woman emerge from underneath the courtyard in a situation eerily similar to what is being depicted in the painting of a man who has lost his mind. Or is it simply a premonition of future disaster? Chapter ends here. Chapter 8, Sakuya, is back with Misaki. The mystery lady immediately leads us towards the lift, and we use the key we got last chapter to access the 4th floor. At the top, we get attacked by the hanging lady, and this fight is so much more fun with the camera, having to actually actively search around for her in the viewfinder rather than just spin around. So much more engaging in my opinion. We find some notes talking about Misaki and a doll, and that the high spiritual potential of both Misaki and the 4th floor isolation room resident will keep them both stable in their condition when they're together, but any episode in either of them could cause the other to spiral. Another note from the nurse indicates that she is really not having a good time, and the spirit we see shows us the code through the door here is the same number that we hear Misaki singing in the previous cutscene, which is a neat way to convey that information. On the way down the hall, we see 2 girls running ahead of us and giggling, and a scurrying nurse will appear in our path to stop us, before attacking. A note outside mentions the patient is clinging to her sanity by fusing parts of her mind into her dolls, and although this is working, it's simply a temporary measure delaying the inevitable. Entering the room, we see a flashback of Misaki visiting this woman, and then seeing her have an episode which has been very badly controlled by the staff, and we see her sitting on the bed, holding the doll. This is Sakuya, and going by her diary entries and from what we know from before, her condition is extremely dire. There's also a note from the assistant talking about the previous nurse that was in charge here, who ran into the room and committed suicide right in front of her, but she continued to sit and smile afterwards. This woman has been having a very rough time of it. However, Sakuya's second diary entry does make it clear that she does deeply care for Misaki, since she notes she doesn't want Misaki to end up like her, and offers up her song, which I assume means she wants to help her get better. There's a section towards the back of the room containing many dolls, which are those that help Sakuya cling to some amount of sanity, and when you approach them, you can hear them whisper, which I think is a great touch, and creeps me out quite a lot. There's also an empty seat here for some reason. One of Misaki's diaries is here, and it mentions the name Mia. Mi from Misaki and Ya from Sakuya. Very interesting. Now we have to do literally the worst puzzle in the game. A slide puzzle. The picture isn't too complicated, and in normal mode the pieces are even numbered, but these things can get complex and difficult at times. And you get to listen to the dolls whispering the entire time, which really puts me over the edge a bit. To be fair, it only took me about 5 minutes, and after completing it you get another diary, which seems to be Sakuya's last moments of sanity, saying goodbye to her father, Yo, and Ayako. This confirms the suspicions that Sakuya is the daughter the director wants to cure, and therefore the vessel in the field rite of descent that wore the mask of the Lunar Eclipse, and by extension, she is the blossomed woman roaming the halls of the facility. This note, along with the notes from Yo in previous chapters, also helped to fuel the very strong theory that Ayako may be a child of Yo and Sakuya, considering her surname is secret and she's been given special treatment by the director. That, and if she isn't, having Yo so close to her is kinda creepy. The mystery woman appears again, urging us to remember, and Misaki ends up on the roof of the infirmary. A woman appears on the edge of the roof, and we reach out towards her, but she jumps off the edge before we can reach her, and honestly the animation kind of makes it look like Misaki pushes her over the edge. Turns out this is Sakuya's mother, racked with self-guilt over her daughter's condition, even though it wasn't her fault. She ended her own life. As we wander through the hallways, we see a man enter a ward which is completely red inside. Turns out this was Choshiro's friend who was sending him the letters from last chapter, and him and his sister attack us as we leave. As we head onwards, the director appears, leading us towards our next treatment. No thank you, I don't want whatever it is you're selling. He brings us to the director's office, where we can get a hidden revenant of a woman sticking her head through the window. Lovely. We activate the secret door and head downstairs into the brain surgery room, where we can see the director trying to do actual brain surgery on the bloodstained bed on Misaki, and then we're attacked by a woman wearing a torture device. I'm guessing her great brain surgery didn't go very well. There's a note afterwards that says Misaki and the other girls' mental states are hanging on by a thread after the rite of descent, and that remembering the details of their kidnapping could shatter their minds. But the worst part is this addendum. Why is she stroking the director's face? What the hell is going on? We move further in, down to the bottom of the well, where we get attacked by the group of masked villagers again. Reading a note on the legend of the Moonglow Well leads Misaki to remember that fateful day. She forgot something down where she was taken, something very important to her. The mystery lady turns up yet again, and Misaki blacks out, before waking up in a completely different area. She knows if she follows this girl, she'll remember something important. She knows she shouldn't, that it can't be right, but she follows anyway. We approach a temple and enter, only to see a large stage, the one on which the rite of descent took place on 10 years ago. As Misaki approaches, she remembers being down here, having the mask placed on her face, and seeing Sakuya blossom after the ritual failed. As the memory ends, Sakuya appears in the middle of the stage, and this time we have to fight. I actually used my good film in this fight for once, and she went down in 3 hits. She's quite easy to fatal frame, even though I only actually managed it once here. After the fight, the mystery woman appears, and shows us what Misaki has been searching for this entire time. A doll lying on the ground, wearing the same outfit as the woman we've been chasing. Turns out this spirit is the embodiment of the memory and emotion Misaki had for the doll, and we're shown clips of her looking after Mia. She was originally Sakuya's doll that helped hold her mind together, but she gave it to Misaki, telling her to put her sense of being into the doll, and so the doll that was both Sakuya and Misaki became Mia. Mia got left behind after the rite of descent, and so was forgotten. It's implied in this scene that the removal of Mia may have been what led to Sakuya's condition rapidly deteriorating, and we see Sakuya say goodbye to Misaki after her episode.
やっぱりミヤにしましょう。この子はあなた、大切にしてね。これがあればきっと私みたいにならずに済むから。さようなら。ミーヤ。
We then see young Misaki holding the doll and crying. This transitions back to present Misaki. Sakuya watches over her tears and hugs her. After a tender moment, Sakuya disappears, Misaki collapses, and the temple doors swing closed, bringing Misaki's story to a close. And yes, if you play in normal mode, this is the last time we actually see Misaki in the game. Because this is hard mode, we get a little bit more, but for now, the chapter ends with Misaki's fate unknown. Ruka is still underneath the well, remembering 10 years ago. She remembers when Choshiro found her, and then she sees a similar vision, but in the present. Choshiro approaches, gives her a mask fragment, and then leaves. Chapter 9 is Descent, and it's a bit more combat focused than the others. We take about 2 steps forward before we get attacked by those masked villagers yet again, but they're easy enough to deal with. Further down the tunnel, Ruka can squeeze through the gap since she's so incredibly skinny, and we enter the Primeval Passage. This is where previous maidens of the island will undergo training, and we see a lot of visions of Sakuya chasing down villagers here, memories of the so-called Day of Tranquility. Apparently after the previous incident, people who hid down here were spared, but unfortunately not the second time. We have to run from Sakuya a few times down here as well, but it's a straight run to the end, so not too difficult. We have to fight the villagers a fair few times as well, but we've seen them enough at this point that they aren't a problem. After the passage, we enter the Temple of the Lunar Eclipse, and as we ascend the many stairs, the sound of the festival above becomes louder and louder, peaking as we reach the door to the outside. The music stops as soon as Ruka opens the door. And we enter the stage for the Rogetsu Kagura. As we approach, we see the familiar sight of the Kagura from 10 years ago. As the vessel and the organs collapse, the villagers run forward, and Ruka is left alone, watching over them. This leads directly into one of the hardest fights in the game, the vessel and her 5 organs. The real issue here is crowd control, as you have to deal with the vessel herself, who honestly isn't that bad, while at least 2 organs attack at the same time. The organs are awful. At times they can appear in the ground and attack from below, and it seems like you need incredible reaction times in order to dodge them. Plus there's 5 of them, meaning the fight can take a while, meaning more chances to take damage. I tried to keep count of how many I defeated, but I realised it didn't really matter since I'd have to defeat them all anyway. I have no real advice for this, just be good? I don't know. Anyway, afterwards, Ruka remembers being taken away during the Kagura, and we need to investigate the other half of the building. As we descend, we see Yo leading Ruka away, taking her to this room containing a shrine and a giant mask hanging from the ceiling that kinda reminds me of that one room from Silent Hill 4. There's a hidden ghost of the vessel and organs preparing for the ritual here, but there's not much we can do in this room yet, unfortunately, so we head back. On the other path, we see Soya, Ruka's father, heading somewhere, and I managed to get attacked by the hanging lady because I looked at this lamp for too long. Soya eventually leads us to a house connected to the temple, which is the Yomotsuki residence, the place Ruka used to call home. The chapter ends with the moon in a waning crescent, and I'm starting to think these aren't actually moon phases since they seem to be going backwards, and it's probably a lunar eclipse considering that's the name of the game. Huh. Chapter 10, Fallen Petals, is back with Choshiro. Taking a photo of the painting shows us the courtyard, so that's where we'll head next. On the way out, Yo is walking towards the gallery, so we follow him instead of our actual objective. He's looking at the painting of his sister, and the notebook he drops reveals the half-alive woman we heard about earlier was indeed Sakuya, and we get a key to the bottom room of the hall. We turn around to leave and... oh, that can't be good. After passing by the wheelchair, the doll lady attacks us, but it's just her this time, so she's pretty easy to defeat. Literally 2 hits. According to her letter, she saw the Blossom Sakuya leave the basement and spread the blossoming around the patients, so she took her sister to the beach. I mean, if I had to die in a calamity situation, I would want it to be somewhere nice like the beach. On the way, I decide to call into Yo's room again, and we find a hidden revenant of Ayako blossoming, which is horrifying. We can open a box in here with a key we got. I don't really know when, but there's a note from Yo talking about how he's enjoying taunting Choshiro, and how he wants Sakuya to wake up so the 3 of us can live happily. I can only assume he's referring to Ayako here, adding further fuel to the theory. Oh, there's also this blackened film reel, but I literally forgot to watch it. Oops. As we enter the courtyard, Choshiro remembers being here before, but then Sakuya actually emerges from the underground, and as Choshiro guesses, we have to fight. And it lasts about 20 seconds. I know Sakuya isn't actually evil herself or anything, she's just a victim of malice and the field ritual and all that, but oh my god, she is not putting up a fight whatsoever. We get to listen to the nurse radio again now, except it's slightly different this time, and Sakuya appears at the door. Except she's not there, and now this room will have the Sakuya sounds playing at all times, which is horrifying and very much puts me on edge. We use the key we got before to enter the Court of the Unhallowed, and see a memory of Sakuya using her incredible core strength to awaken.
Firm up those abs. Do this regularly to work out your core muscles.
There's a note here that mentions by all previous records they should have harvested Sakuya's face after the ritual, but since she was still technically alive, they weren't allowed, which ultimately led to the events of the Day of Tranquility. As Choshiro approaches Sakuya's bed, Sayaka appears behind him. He's obviously surprised by this, as am I, but she tells him to give the mask fragment to Ruka, in the place he found her in all those years ago. Then she vanishes. I don't know what's going on right now, but we pick up the mask fragment and head back up. We find a hidden ghost of a woman underneath the floor here. Clearly her hiding spot didn't save her in the end. Outside here, Sakuya actually does attack again. I didn't even attempt to fight back and just ran back upstairs. We've dealt with her here before. We arrive back down in the bottom of the well, and are greeted by Director Haibara and some masked villagers. Yet again, as with every Choshiro fight, this isn't particularly difficult. Haibara likes to use projectiles, but keep him on your sights and he'll go down fine. Afterwards, the young versions of the girls are here, and Choshiro hands the mask fragment to a young Ruka. Yu appears behind him and runs, and we follow him up the lift. On the way, Yu taunts us, and he runs far too quickly for me to take a good photo of him. On the roof itself, Choshiro looks for Yo, turns a corner, and Yo sticks a knife into his side. Filled with rage, Choshiro makes a desperate move and tackles Yo, throwing both of them off of the roof. He lands on the ground outside the infirmary, in the exact position he woke at the start of Chapter 3, revealing he has been dead this entire time. His spirit looks over his corpse, and Sayaka is also there, meaning she must have also died. Choshiro gives her a weak smile, as he now understands his ultimate fate, and the chapter ends with only Ruka remaining. Chapter 11, Eclipse, begins with Ruka standing in her old home. As we move through the house, we see Soya walking and talking about the ritual and the mass of the lunar eclipse, before eventually reaching a door sealed by 3 charms. We need to find the 3 masks throughout the house that also have these charms on them in order to enter. The first one is in this side room, which I think are sleeping quarters for Soya's apprentices, and here we find out that Soya's ancestor, Soetsu, was the person responsible for the ancient Day of Tranquility, and Soya wants to make things right by him again. Ruka also notes that there's something soft underneath this quilt, but it doesn't react. Girl, that's literally a corpse. We pick up the first mask, and immediately afterwards are attacked by one of Soya's apprentices. This fight is actually so annoying, since right before he attacks, he starts to teleport around a bit, which makes landing a fatal frame a lot more difficult, and means you're a lot more likely to get hit. Although I do like the strange noises you hear during this fight. I guess it's nice to get a challenge every so often. Next we head into the front hall and get a phone call from Sayaka, mentioning something important she left behind on the island. Good thing we're here then. We also get the second mask here, and see what could either be Sayaka's spirit, or a memory of the past. The next section is the same one we went through earlier, from Ruka's room in the hall. As we move upstairs, we hear the familiar piano tune playing from Ruka's bedroom, and we play the piano game for a third time. I actually managed to make a mistake this time, and have to play it all again. Ruka takes her piano lessons very seriously. A vision shows us something inside Sayaka's room, so we head over there next, but not before reading a diary entry where Ruka's glad that her parents' connection will never go away. Well, about that. Inside Sayaka's room, we find a guardian mirror, and a note telling us about the moon song that is passed from mother to daughter in the guardian bloodline. Another note tells us that Sayaka herself is a guardian. Even though the practices and rituals are no longer carried out, she still belongs to the lineage. Placing the mirror on the stand allows us to take a picture of an old score on the wall, representing the phases of the moon. We don't know what this means yet, but we take note of it anyway. We also get the third mask, opening up that door from before. Downstairs we have to fight the apprentice again, but in a more open area this time, but I'm not really sure if that gives us any advantage here, honestly. Inside Soya's room, we find a moon score, and a note mentioning this is needed in order to open the path to the Temple of Tsukiyomi, which coincidentally is our next destination. We also pick up an organ mask, which is also needed to open the door, and a decoding key, which appears to translate the moon scores into modern sheet music. Thankfully, we will not have to manually decode these, but this item is very important for later. We make our way back to the antechamber from before, and oh god, we have to fight the organs again. You would think the removal of the vessel would make this fight easier, but I actually had a lot more trouble with this one. Maybe they act more aggressively here. After the fight, we place the organ mask on the altar, and have to match this plaque up to the moon score we found earlier. Thankfully we can just pull up the image, so it's not difficult or anything. The altar moves, and we enter an extremely long tunnel down towards the temple proper, seeing visions of Yo pulling Ruka along the entire way. We go onto the stage and find a mask fragment that Misaki had from before, but she is nowhere to be seen. We get to see the full rite of descent here, including when the mask shattered, causing Sakuya to blossom and also causing the Kagura vessel to die at the same time. We also see Misaki leave Mia behind again for some reason, even though Ruka herself does not care one bit about Mia. She's fine though, she looks comfortable. On the way out, Sakuya will attack once again, and she will follow the entire way up the tunnel. You should be fine as long as you keep moving, although remembering which way to turn to continue can be tricky at times. She'll disappear before the save point though, don't worry. After leaving, we'll see Soya wandering after the field ritual, and he'll go into Shugen Temple. Damn, how many temples does this place need? Inside, we see a hidden ghost letting us know that a lot of the masks here are made from the skin of human faces. Lovely. So glad I received that information. We also pick up the third mask fragment, before heading into the workshop. Funnily enough, there's a cutscene of Ruka watching her father work here, but I managed to activate it in the same spot as the Hosuki doll audio cue, so we could hear that the whole way through, which really took away from the tension at the moment. Now we have to fight Soya, and this can be a really difficult fight. He actually broke my mirror stone, which is essentially a free life at the very beginning of the fight. He shoots these blue mask projectiles, but if you take any photo of him they'll disappear. He also attacks very quickly, so you need to be very quick if you want to hit those fatal frames. His mask is also weird and rotten looking, and I don't want to see it anymore. Thank you. After the fight, Soya lets us know the eclipse is starting, and the chapter ends. And he's right, the moon is almost completely covered. At the beginning of the final chapter, Hallowed Realm, Ruka mentions in the summary that the entirety of this disaster was down to the actions of her father, but honestly Ruka, I feel like there's a few more bad eggs in this situation. I'm not letting the director out of this one. We do get a look at the lighthouse turning on here, letting us know that maybe that's where we're headed next. Soya left behind a note stating that he had no idea why the ritual failed, and we get to see Sakuya awaken and wander the island, causing everyone to see her face to blossom, therefore fulfilling the prophecy created by the painting of the Day of Tranquility. We can move this altar to the side, revealing the path forward. Down here we see several visions of Sakuya as she moves through the island, wanting everyone to blossom. And then we had to fight the damn apprentice again. Oh my god, leave me alone. Eventually we come across the place Soya waited before his death and find his final words. He notes that if Sakuya performed the rite of descent again on the next eclipse, she would blossom even more than she already has. That doesn't sound like a good thing, so we should probably do something about that. Outside is the beach, which is a lot less sandy than I would have liked, and we can get photos of people collapsed on the beach, and also those who wandered out to sea in vain hopes of survival. Ruka figures out that Sakuya has headed to the top of the lighthouse, since that's the place closest to the moon on the island, which is a great piece of logic I wouldn't have figured out, honestly. However, before we can enter, we need to fight the last vessel, Tsubaki Tono. This fight is very similar to the last time we fought her, although she doesn't have her mask on this time, so there's a possibility of her blooming. She's also in this really narrow passageway. I tried to lure her out to the beach, but I decided about halfway through it wasn't worth it anyway. As we enter the lighthouse itself, we have to fight Soya again, and the fight is exactly the same as before. Afterwards, via a note from Suetsu, we find that if Sakuya is allowed to perform the rite again, then the blossoming will spread beyond the island and cause literally everyone on Earth to blossom. The only way to prevent this is to use the true mask of the Lunar Eclipse, of which we only have 3 parts. I actually really love this area, as you can hear the sound of the moon organ on the top floor playing throughout, and as you progress higher and higher, it gets louder and louder, and it's so chilling. It really adds to the tension of approaching the end of the journey. The only criticism I have here is that we have to fight Soya another 2 times, but I guess it is the final chapter, so we need a bit of a challenge, especially on these narrow pathways. After the second fight we get literally nothing for our efforts except the path forward, but after the third and final fight, he leaves a note, letting us know that the missing piece of the ritual was something that could help soothe the souls of the dead, that would reverberate in their souls, and the crucial last piece of the mask of the Lunar Eclipse. At the peak of the lighthouse, we find Sayaka waiting for us. She urges us to play the moon song for Sakuya, leaving behind a note that lets us know this song will allow the souls of the dead to reach the hallowed realm. The final boss arena is a great area. The beams enclosing the area are pretty, and the size is great for a boss fight, and the moon organ itself is a great spectacle to see here at the end. Sakuya's design is amazing to look at, but the boss fight itself is... I mean, yeah, I know I was using the Zero film, but I expected her to take more than 4 hits. Maybe she's more tough in Nightmare mode. Approaching the altar, Ruka uses the moon score from her mother and a decoding key from her father to obtain the moon song score. And we play the piano game one final time, and it's confirmed the song Ruka has remembered this whole time was in fact the Guardian's moon song all along. The playing causes the souls of the dead to coalesce in Sakuya, and Ruka rushes to place the mask on her face, but trips down the stairs at the final moments. The spirit of Choshiro appears, picks up the mask and places it on Sakuya's face, appeasing the dead and allowing them to move on to the next world. I'm not really sure how to feel about this detail, to be honest. I've seen some people say it rounds off Choshiro's story better than it would Ruka's, but Choshiro never really had anything to do with Sakuya, just Yo. If anything, it would make much more sense to have Misaki come in and do this. The shadow of the lunar eclipse opens a hole in the ocean, and the spirits on the island move through Sakuya, using her as a vessel, allowing them to pass on to the hallowed realm, all while the absolute banger Zero no Choritsu by Tsukiko Amano plays, which I honestly didn't realise was only the hard and nightmare ending theme. After completing normal mode, I thought they completely replaced it with noise in the remaster, which is also a banger in its own right. As the mask falls to the ground, Soya appears and picks it up. He turns to face Ruka, and she remembers the warm smile he used to look at her with when she was a child. His spirit moves on with the rest, and Ruka runs after him, calling out to him as he passes through. The credits start to roll as we watch several spirits we encountered sink to the bottom of the ocean, finally at peace. Here is where we get the hard mode exclusive ending told entirely in picture form. We see Misaki awake back in the temple of Tsukiyomi, and Madoka's spirit appears before her. She leaves Mia behind. Madoka's spirit is finally at peace. We assume Madoka led Misaki outside of the caves, as we see Misaki watch the spirits pass on to the next life at the Tori Gate at the beach. We end with a post-credit scene of Ruka once again playing the Moon Song on the piano, except this time in a major key, symbolizing her moving on and accepting the events of her past. And we see a vision of Soetsu's hallowed realm, a forest with the reflection of the full moon on a pond. The very end of the game gives you your points and a rank. I missed a lot of the ghost list this time through missing optional stuff and generally being bad at the game, so I got a C rank, which is better than the D rank I got in normal mode. We also unlocked Nightmare mode and some additional outfits like a strapless dress for some reason. Even though the main story is over, there's still a mission mode for you to play through if you want something extra. I haven't done too much of this myself, but it's essentially a score attack mode, putting you in a specific situation, such as this one with Chochiro fighting the Peter Ghost. Later missions involve only fighting using specific lenses or films, and they get harder as they progress. Overall, I had a fantastic time playing this game. The atmosphere and general vibe of the location is exactly what I want in a horror game. I appreciate that this series doesn't rely exclusively on jump scares. I have no issue when they're used sparingly like this game does, but if it is the only thing a game has going for it, it loses a lot of points in my book. The ghost designs are also some of the best in the series, and the personal stories are amazing. I still find myself getting upset for Madoka and Sakuya, despite knowing their stories for over 10 years at this point. My only criticisms will be what I've already mentioned regarding the ending with Choshiro, and that some of the wall and floor textures can be a bit crusty if you look at them up close, but that's a minor nitpick. Well, there's also the difficulty with identifying and picking up items, but I haven't played Maiden of Blackwater yet, so they could have already addressed my concerns. I genuinely think this experience was worth the 15-year wait. It's a lovely experience I've very much enjoyed, and I really hope that the interest in this game encourages the team to consider porting the original trilogy. I don't even need a remaster, just let me play them. I don't like them being locked on the PS2 forever. And with that, our time looking at Project 04, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse is over. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, comment or subscribe for more. These videos take a long time to make, and although I do love doing it, the support would really mean the world to me. As for next time, I have literally no idea, you'll have to leave that with me. Anyway, thank you for watching, have a lovely day, and goodbye.